Sergey, the autonomous vehicle market's evolving. It's changing. There's chatter now about personally autonomous vehicles. Miss Mary Barr out on the GM earnings call said the personally autonomous vehicles are coming from GM. Mr. Elon Musk is talking about the vehicles coming. The big question is, sir, how are you going to insure personally on autonomous vehicle?
That is probably the most important question to answer after you figure out the tech side of things. And my response to that would be similar to how you used to evaluate human drivers. You look at their accident history, at their driving record, maybe you have a telematics footprint. You'll have to do similar thing for robotaxis and AI. And you will want to look at the past accidents, but the challenge is that there's not going to be a lot of them, if any. So the only thing you can look at will be the technical performance on the real roads. You need to evaluate the AI behavior somehow. And that's going to be a technical problem in my view. And the way to underwrite and insure personally owned autonomous vehicles is by bridging this gap from evaluating human risks to evaluating software risks. And insurance companies will need to fill that gap, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Who carries the risk? Is it the owner of the vehicle, the lessee of the vehicle, the autonomous driving software developer, or the manufacturer? Who's going to hold that liability?
I believe that you need to understand the different modes of driving. So as of today, and there is no comparable for this. So it hasn't happened before. It's going to be happening for the first time. And I think we're going to know a lot more over the next 3 months, especially around 1010. But I can tell you, it's reasonable to expect 3 modes of operation. First mode is that you have a capable autonomous vehicle and you have a steering wheel and you are the driver, you drive it yourself. So that's good old stuff. We know how that works. Then there's going to be the second mode when you engage in self-driving and you might have the wheel in front of you or you might have the wheel that's going to be folded. Now, when the wheel is folded or when you are, let's say, not sitting in a driver's seat, but you are in the back, then you have no control over what the vehicle is doing, so you're not responsible. It's going to be the software, and as a result, it's going to be the manufacturer. And then it might be the third component or the third mode where you actually lend your vehicle to the network. The liability is going to follow the responsibility, and that's what's going to drive the insurance here and at fault evaluation as well. So if you have an autonomous vehicle, want to buy an autonomous vehicle, you must have the insurance, but you will use your insurance to a certain extent. But as soon as you are out of the control, it's going to be the OEM, the manufacturer.
That seems like that's going to come down to software or he said, she says, and you're going to have to look at data to verify. It seems that the liability is going to be complicated unless looking at the data. Is there a way from an underwriting perspective to simplify that data? Perhaps very similar to what the Uber drivers do when they're on driving, the Uber policy kicks in. When they're not driving, they have to have that in-between policy. Something very similar like that becomes automated, or is this going to be massively complicated?
I think he'll have to become automated to make commercial sense. Otherwise, it's going to be too expensive. And I believe that there is going to be a way how you can pull the data from the vehicle in a way that's going to be easy to understand and interpret by all the parties, by the OEM itself, by the owner, by the insurance company, by the court, if necessary. And right now, it's a very manual process. And the whole investigation process when a crash happens is super manual. And when you have a system that's rich with data, there has to be a solution that's going to simplify that. We actually do that today, but we do that on the commercial side of things. And on the commercial side of things, I would say it's relatively easier because, some incidents may be intricate and you can justify having the manual review. But when you have the personally owned vehicles where there's going to be a lot of them and the frequency might be high, you must have an automated or semi-automated solution for reports and data analysis. That's no question about it.
In the event of a crash, who's responsible? Does that go back to your 3 modes? And depending on if individuals engaged, individuals in the back seat, does that determine who the liability is in the event of a crash?
Yep, I'm pretty sure about that. And so when a crash happens, it can happen in 3 different places. It can be you driving and you're behind the steering wheel. It could be you're in the car, but there was no steering wheel, it was all software. Or it might be on a network if we're talking about what Tesla wants to do. And all those 3 modes will have different implications for how the crash is going to be taken care of. If it's you driving, that's one thing, okay? And that could be the police reports. You'll follow the same old process and you can call up your insurance company. Now, if it's in an autonomous mode and you were not responsible, that's going to be heavily on the OEM. And the OEM will have to go dig into the data and understand whether the software was at fault or there was a third party. Now, if it's on a network, it's most likely going to be even the separate policy, and that separate policy will work with a different set of stakeholders to evaluate who was responsible. So it's going to be a lot to begin with, but I think we'll get to the point where it's going to be simplified. And again, it's going to come down to making sure that the data is easily and readily available. So to the question that we just talked about, kind of all comes back to data if you think about it.
Does the data get shared with a police officer or a first responder at the incident of a crash that they can automatically know who's at fault, or is this going to create paperwork for the police and first responders to determine who's at fault? Because I believe if you're going to create that paperwork, you're going to create costs, you're going to create burdens. The cost to operate these are going to go up. Is there a way to simplify that?
Theoretically, there is a way, and possibly there is a way when, let's say, the police arrives, that there is a way to pull some of the data from the vehicle right into the tool that the police can use at the scene. And by the way, doing that will be just magical, I think, for the police departments to use. But it's going to be very complicated technically, because the first thing that comes to mind is the privacy. Do we have the ability to do something like that? Secondly, how this is going to work technically. So the data, if it's stored in the vehicle or if it's somewhere in the cloud, you have to pull it into a separate tool. You probably have to clean it up to standardize this. And you need to make sure that you're showing the right thing to the right person at the right time. And it could be, minutes, maybe hours in between the accident and the police shows up. Like orchestrating this whole platform is quite a challenge. And that's why I think there has to be a technical solution to this. To begin with, is going to be the same old approach, heavily paper-based, and will require a lot of manual input. But I think in the near future, we can start implementing something like this. We have the early versions of something that can work, but to make sure that it works at scale, it's a whole different ballgame. But it's also going to be a whole different return on investment, because if you can do something like this, it's going to just simplify so many things for everyone involved. It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. Let's throw another ingredient here because this is fun. The claims process. Sensors are expensive. How is the claims process going to work, and how are we going to know what body shops are authorized to work on these vehicles, since the tech is so highly complicated compared to a traditional vehicle?
I think it's going to take a while for the body shops to be able to fix autonomous vehicles. And it also depends on what kind of vehicles we're going to have. So if we're going to have vision only and the Tesla approach becomes the dominant approach, it might be easier. Then you don't really care about the cameras that much. You care about the vehicle itself. And I know there are body shops who can take in Teslas, and I'm pretty sure that they can already take in Cybertrucks and repair that. I think Tesla is the best, but they're already trying. But if you have more sophisticated systems with LiDARs, that's going to be interesting. I'm pretty sure, well, I don't know for sure, but I can assume that if you go to a body shop, even the coolest body shops in the US, and you ask them to fix your LiDAR, they're going to look at you like you're weird. I don't think they have that capability right now. The OEMs that are going to be shipping the first-person owned autonomous vehicles, regardless of the stack, they're definitely going to have an advantage over repairs. And that leads us to the logical conclusion that, well, if OEMs have the data and they can do the repairs the best and they have all the parts, okay, that they might be the best party to actually provide insurance, which I'm a firm believer is the case.
I agree with that. There's precedent in the marketplace. Tesla currently has the ability to sell insurance in 12 states. On October 10th, they're going to introduce the Cybercab. They're going to introduce the personally owned autonomous vehicle that will operate part of the Tesla network. In order for Tesla to scale that, do they have to be able to have the ability to sell insurance in all 50 states, because they're going to take the risk onto their balance sheet and then reinsure it and not have to worry about dealing with the traditional insurance market? Hi, I bought a personal Tesla. No, I won't insure that. To eliminate that potential risk in the business?
I think the answer is yes. And I honestly do not envision, I can imagine there is a world where big insurance companies find a way into the autonomous vehicle space, personally owned autonomous vehicle space, but OEMs, it's just so logical that they should integrate this into it themselves. I think insurance is going to be the second most pressing issue after the technology itself. Even if it's an autonomous vehicle and it's capable and there is data proving that, you will not be able to sell it if you don't have insurance. You literally will not be able to deliver the vehicle without insurance. It's the law. And I don't think they're going to change the law because the autonomous vehicle, as long as you have the ability to operate this manually. So Tesla is going to be in a situation is that, okay, before they can start selling whatever cyber caps or whatever they call it, they need to figure out the insurance. And that insurance has to cover both the human drivers and the autonomous mode, when you don't have the steering wheel. And as far as I know, even the product that they have today is not fully fit for that. So they have to come up with a modification to it or a totally new product that's going to be for cyber caps, and they have to do it. I don't think if they go to Geico or Progressive that they'll be able to provide them with something like this. So in order for robotaxis, personal robotaxis to scale, insurance has to be taken care of. And I'm 100% sure that the OEMs that are serious about robotaxis, I hope they're having this conversation today, because the insurance product development life cycle, it takes time. It could take up to 2 years to deliver that. And without that, they will not be able to ship it. No way.
Agree with that. If Tesla successfully gets the ability to sell Tesla insurance in all 50 states, as GM introduces their personal autonomous vehicle, they're going to be forced to do that. And I agree, if it's Hyundai does something with the Genesis brand and they merge the emotional tech in there, the Hyundai executives, that's your best play there. You're going to get a good ROI, return on your investment there in motion, by making a personally owned Genesis vehicle. The next question for your aspect, Sergey, who steps up to reinsure the risk? Is this going to go through a Swiss Re, a Munich Re, something through Lloyd's? Or is there risk appetite to do this from a reinsurance perspective? And then two, is there capacity to do this?
The top three reinsurance companies in the world are Munich Re, Swiss Re, and Hanover Re. It's not public information, but it's reasonable to assume that all of those three, or some of those, work with companies like Tesla and GM. Those are known automotive reinsurers. Maybe Berkshire Hathaway. I don't think Lloyd's is going to be a fit, because Lloyd's is more for like specialty products, and I don't think they're necessarily known for automotive reinsurance. So I would say Lloyd's is unlikely. I'm pretty sure Tesla does have reinsurance today. GM Cruise and Waymo, they all have reinsurance. I suspect that those reinsurance companies, they treat autonomous vehicles more like a special project than a immediate business opportunity. And I don't think they still have the technical capability or business conviction to go all in. And don't forget, insurance, it's a super conservative business. So unless there is a regulatory approval of the software or something like that, they're probably going to put minimal resources to it. But as soon as that happens, I think it's going to be a different conversation. Well, in other words, if let's say Tesla wants to sell 25,000 cyber caps by 2026, I think the capacity might not be there for that scale in 2026. I'm afraid that the bigger insurance companies will not have enough business conviction and technical expertise to deliver such reinsurance program to support that kind of growth. So I'm not sure that's going to happen. But if in 2025 and 2026 we see some form of regulatory approval, I think they will have the justification to put more resources into it. And then that might happen.
It could. If you get GM, Tesla, Hyundai, Toyota all introduced personally owned autonomous vehicles, you've got a pretty big market there. If you want to throw VW in for, you've got a big chunk of the market. Sergey, in your opinion, what is the future of personally owned autonomous vehicle insurance going to look like? Are consumers going to purchase it when they sign a subscription for the vehicle? Are they going to go to a specialty retailer to get it? Will it be bundled in? What is that going to look like?
Over the past 12 months, clearly shift happening from commercial to personal. I love commercial, but not clear if the business model will survive. I hope it will. Everybody will benefit from that. Personally owned autonomous vehicles make total sense from the economics perspective, but the tech hurdle is higher because you have to control the costs. So the tech has to be a lot more performant. I think the relationship between the consumer and the OEM, the manufacturer, is going to skyrocket. And similar to how you have the relationship with, let's say, Apple or Samsung, and you rely on them when you're in your daily lives, it's going to be similar with the OEMs. And those OEMs will be responsible for the product. They might be responsible for the experience, for the liability, for a lot of things. And it's a new challenge for the OEM because they're going to go from building cars to building software, building experiences, building services. And that's something that Apple has done, for example, as their services revenue starts to approach the iPhone sales revenue and probably will overtake it. OEMs will go through the similar thing. And Tesla is just showing us how it's going to be done. And then everybody else will follow. And it's going to be GM, Ford, European automakers. Chinese automakers probably already doing a great job with it. I'm pretty sure they're quite ahead in there. So that's the future that I envision, that OEMs will become the most important player here.
OEMs will become the most important player. The auto business today will not be the auto business a decade from now, when personally autonomous vehicles will make the auto business highly, highly profitable. And Tesla will once again disrupt another market. Very similar to what they did to energy, that they did to electric vehicles, they are going to do to personally owned autonomous vehicles. And let's not forget, outside the technology development, the second most important thing is insurance. And if you need good insurance, call Koop, Sergey and the team. We'll make sure you're insured right. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is personally owned autonomous vehicles. Sergey, thank you so much for coming on the Road to Autonomy Insights today.
Thank you, Grayson.